Hey, Tyler here for BleepinJeep.com. This week, let's talk about lockers. So what's the big deal with all these lockers and stuff? Well, if you've never driven an off-road vehicle that's equipped with one of these traction devices, you're in for a real surprise. They are truly a game changer. They open up so much capability and opportunity for you and your four-wheel drive. They will make you feel like an off-road hero.
Oh yes, lockers. Yes, we love them. We love them.
If you've struggled with open differentials, like we all have, the moment you drive a vehicle equipped with one of these traction devices, your entire world changes. Let's see if we can figure out what's going to be the best one for your application. Here it is, the dreaded open differential that most of our Jeeps come with from the factory. And you can see it's very simple design. Your axles come in from the sides. They have splines on them that engage a spider gear. These two spider gears engage another spider gear that is held in place by a pin. This whole thing right here is called the carrier. So the carrier has the ring gear attached to it, and the pinion gear is down inside. So if I turn the pinion, you see how it turns the entire carrier, and that rotates our axles. So what's the big deal with the open diff? Well, the problem with the open differential is that it sends all of your torque, all of your power, to the wheel with the least amount of traction. So watch this spider gear right here. It's going to remain stationary, and the entire carrier assembly is going to be able to move. So let's say this side over here has good traction, but this side over here, the wheel is up in the air. Well, if this side has good traction, no torque is applied to it. All of the torque, and I'll do this by spinning the pinion, all of the torque is applied to the wheel that has no traction. See how this gear isn't moving, but this one is. That's why when you get a wheel in the air, it just spins and spins and you don't go anywhere. And that's why you get stuck so easy. Really what this means is your four-wheel drive vehicle is only really two-wheel drive, because one wheel has power at the back and one wheel has power at the front. Not a real great design for off-roading. Gives you awesome road manners, but really a crappy design for off-road use. So, can you tell if you've got an open differential without yanking the cover off? Absolutely. Just jack the rear axle up so that both wheels are off the ground. Give them a spin. They'll spin opposite of each other like that. If you're still not sure, stop one from moving. If you can spin the other, you have an open differential. Want to know if your vehicle is equipped with a traction device? Jack up the rear end, spin the tires. If both tires spin in unison, same direction like that, you have some sort of traction device in the rear end. So the word locker is really kind of a generic term. Really, to be accurate, what we're talking about here are traction devices. Lockers happen to be one type of traction device. So I've broken this down into three real general categories of traction devices, which include lockers, limited slips, and spools. So let's go over these three groups and kind of look at the pros and cons of each one. Now, lockers break down into basically two categories: automatic lockers and selectable lockers. What a locker is, lockers do not rely on any kind of a clutch device. They literally will lock both axles together so they spin at the same rate, the same amount of torque is applied to both wheels, but they have some sort of a provision for then unlocking. Automatic lockers include lunchbox lockers, which are your Aussie lockers, your Lock-Right. There's a whole, Yukon makes some, there's a whole bunch of brands out there. The advantage of a lunchbox locker is you do not have to replace your entire carrier. This just replaces the spider gears. So as a general rule, they're quite a bit less expensive. You don't have to reset up all of your gears and everything when you put one of these in. Oftentimes you can install these without even removing your carrier from the axle. Disadvantages are they're noisy, first of all. They bang and they click, and they also create some really weird road handling characteristics. They can cause you to change lanes when you didn't mean to when they lock and unlock. So these automatic lockers can really affect your on-road manners. And you really need to be used to driving them, especially if you drive them in the snow or on the ice. You can really get into trouble with one of these. The other type of automatic locker is a full carrier locker. And when you hear a Detroit locker, that's probably the most common thing I hear is a Detroit locker. It replaces the entire carrier assembly. The ring gear attaches to it, and you have to reset up your gears when you put in one of these. The advantage is they're quite a bit stronger than a lunchbox locker. But if you want to go brute strength, but you still want to have the ability for the axles to unlock, then you want to go with a full carrier locker. Now, selectable lockers. Selectable lockers include electric, air, or cable actuated. Examples of this, an electric one would be like the Eaton E-Locker. The lockers that come in a Jeep Rubicon, I believe they're electric actuated. They have a little servo down on the pumpkin that will activate the locker. Probably the most popular, well-known air locker is the ARB. Everybody's heard of the ARB. It uses a small compressor that you have to mount somewhere in your vehicle to create air pressure, and that air pressure then actuates the locker inside the differential. And then there's cable, like the aux. And aux also has a provision for an E-locker as well. Aux lockers are great. I've run an aux locker for years and years. Why a selectable locker? Well, the nice thing about a selectable locker is when it's disengaged, your differential will operate just like an open differential, which gives you very good road manners. It eliminates your tire wear. It eliminates weird handling characteristics. You don't chirp your tires. Your car doesn't bang and pop and change lanes when you don't want it to. So these are really, really good in front axle applications. These are very strong. Very strong. Aux lockers are dang near indestructible. ARBs are really good. I don't have a lot of personal experience with the E-Locker. Nothing's indestructible, but I think they're pretty good as well. Disadvantage to these are they are generally a pile of money. Plus you're going to have your gears reset up because it replaces the entire carrier. All of these replace the entire carrier. So probably a smart time to put a locker in is when you're doing a gear set change anyways. So you don't have to pay for that labor twice. So you've got the hassle and the expense of setting up your gears, the initial expense of the locker itself. Disadvantages of cable ones, it's kind of a pain in the butt to run the cable. However, I really like the cable because it's just caveman simple and it's bomb proof. There's no hoses to break, no wires to break, no air lines to leak. The ARB, again, disadvantage, very expensive. You have to set up your gears again. Also, you have to purchase a compressor with this, so you need to buy their kit, which means you have to wire in and mount up an air compressor somewhere in the vehicle. So these are a little bit, I think, more difficult to install than the aux. E-lockers, again, they're expensive. You have to set up your gears. You have to run the electrical wiring to them to get them to operate. The next group of traction devices we want to talk about are limited slips. And Wikipedia says there's 4 kinds: fixed value, torque sensing, speed sensing, and electronic. Yeah, okay, I'm not going to get into all of that. Generally how these work is they have some sort of usually a clutch system. So this is what's called a limited slip. If you'll notice, the carrier has a little bit different shape. Instead of being bell-shaped, it's got a little bit larger carrier. That's to accommodate clutch discs and springs that are between the spider gear and the edge of the housing here on the carrier. These clutch packs exert pressure on the spider gears. Let me bring you in here and show you. These are spring-loaded clutch packs that sit behind the spider gear that is attached to the axle. What those clutch packs do is if I spin one wheel, it forces the other one to spin with it. You see, remember how the other one side would remain stationary while the other one spun. This one, both sides move in unison. That's because those clutch packs are exerting friction, pressure, force on the back of these spider gears. Now you can overcome this, but it's hard. I can get them to move independent a little bit, but it's not easy. So what this does is in the snow or during off-roading, if one wheel starts to spin, instead of all the power going to that wheel like an open differential and getting stuck there, these clutch packs force some of that power to go to the axle that does have traction. And the result is you don't get stuck nearly as often. These are great for occasional off-roading, driving in the snow, rain, conditions like that. These limited slips are great for that. Rock crawling and real technical stuff, not so much, because these clutch packs are just not strong enough, with great big tires especially, to overcome the forces exerted on them. So if I can do that just by hand, then you know great big huge tires rock crawling, that this traction device is not going to be able to lock up the axles strong enough to be able to do real technical rock climbing, rock crawling, and that kind of stuff. But much better than open diff. Really good road manners. This still has good road manners. It's going to allow, as I go around a turn, one tire has to spin faster than the other. So this will allow them to do that. So you don't get the chirping, the barking, the tire wear like you do with a full-on locker. The axles are never really completely locked together generally with these. But they do provide much better traction than an open differential. The exception to that would be this True Track, the Eaton True Track. I'm running the True Track in my Ford 9-inch rear end and my YJ. This differential, or this limited slip, is outstanding. It uses some physics between worm gears and spur gears, and I'll show you here how that works. A worm gear can drive a sun gear, but a sun gear cannot drive a worm gear. So there doesn't need to be any kind of safety or locking mechanism or anything. This cable cannot spool out unless you physically rotate this worm gear, because a sun gear cannot drive a worm gear. This is exactly how your Detroit True Track locker works in your differential. It's off this exact same principle. But there's no clutches in this at all, so you don't need any kind of a friction modifier in your rear differential oil or anything like that. And these give you really good road manners and really good performance off-road. I have been super impressed with my True Track. Absolutely love it. But they can be expensive. They do require you to set up your gears. Good things about, well, and another negative is that in some of these you have to use friction modifiers in the oil in your rear differential. So you've got to be real careful when you change the oil in your rear diff. The True Track, however, that does not apply. There's also some, I think it's called a Torsen 1 and a Torsen 2, that work on the same principle as the True Track. They don't require friction modifiers. So that's limited slips. Basically, there's some sort of a clutch system or a torque sensing system in the gears that allows some slippage of the axles, but gives you much better traction than an open differential. So our last category are called spools. And all a spool is is it's just a device that physically locks the two axles together, and they are as if they are one piece. They can't unlock, there's no torque sensing, there's no slippage. You basically have turned your rear axle into one solid piece with a spool. There's really kind of three ways to do this. There's a lunchbox spool, just like the lunchbox locker, and it replaces just the spider gears. There's a full carrier spool that replaces the whole carrier. And then something they call Lincoln locking, which is basically you weld your spider gears to the carrier and it turns your open differential into a spool. Now the advantage of a spool, they're very lightweight. If you go with a full carrier spool, they're very lightweight. They are very strong. They're very simple. There are no moving parts in them at all. They're extremely simple. They're pretty inexpensive. If you Lincoln lock it, you can do it yourself if you know how to weld. Disadvantages: if you're going to drive your vehicle on road at all, you do not want a spool. If you try to drive a vehicle equipped with a spool in the rear end in the snow and the ice, you will not be able to control your vehicle. You will be right off the road. These are really basically competition rock crawler and racing applications only. If you're going to drive your car on the road at all, I do not recommend a spool. If you are going to go with a spool, don't screw around with a lunchbox locker. Get a full carrier. If you want to do it on the cheap, you can weld your spider gears. However, that's a really easy thing to screw up. And when you weld those gears, you're messing with the metallurgy, you're messing with the temper of them. And if you do it wrong, you're just going to grenade the rear end. So a quick review of the pros and cons. Lockers, you've got automatics. Lunchbox lockers, the pros, you don't have to set up your gears. They're really expensive. The bad is they're weak and they have bad road manners. This is the same for full carriers. Full carriers have bad road manners. You have to re-gear or reset up your gears, so they can be expensive. The pros, full carriers, are very strong, they're very simple. And they're automatic. You don't have to think about them, they just work when you need them. Selectable lockers. The pros are they've got good road manners, because when they're disengaged, it's just like an open differential. So these literally give you both worlds. Not the best of both worlds, but both worlds. When they're engaged, they're like a full spool. So they are extremely good for traction, and they're very strong. Cons, they're really expensive up front. You have to reset up your gears, and you have to actuate them on the trail. They don't operate automatically, so you have to anticipate what's happening beforehand. Especially some of these, you have to come to a complete stop to engage them. Limited slips. Pros are they work automatically. You don't have to actuate anything. They've got pretty good road manners. You basically won't notice that these are even there. The bad thing is, some of them you have to put an additive in your oil, a friction additive. If you're doing a full carrier, which most of these are, you have to reset up your gears, which means expensive. Now, if you're going to go limited slip, I recommend the Eaton True Track. Like I said, I've run it for a long time. Love it. If you've got the money, I would go with an Ox locker and a selectable. They're just bomb-proof. They're absolutely indestructible. And they give you, like I said, both worlds. They give you good road manners when they're disengaged and incredible traction when they're engaged. Spools, pros are they're simple, they're cheap, they give you insane traction, and they're lightweight. The bad is they are terrible on road. They don't just give you bad road manners, they give you awful road manners. They're really for race and competition applications only, or a dedicated rock crawler, something that is off-road only. They create a lot of tire and component wear, especially if you put a spool up front. It puts tremendous stress on your steering components In fact, if you don't have hydro assist or full hydro steering, you're probably not going to be able to run a spool up front because you just won't be able to steer. So if you got something that's a race or competition or dedicated off-road use only, spool is a good way to go. If your budget's a little bit tight, but you want really good off-road performance and good on-road manners, the Eaton True Track Limited Slip is the way I would go. If you've got the money, it's really hard to compare anything to a selectable locker. In a front axle application, selectable is the only way to go. They are more expensive, but in the long run, I think they're worth it. All right, guys, so that's it for lockers. Now, these are just my opinions. There's a lot of opinions out there. I'd like to hear from you guys, see what you have to say about it. Post in the comment section below your experiences with some of these traction devices. As always, like, share, and subscribe so we can keep the videos coming. We'll see you next time. Thanks for watching.